I saw them switch the item. 5 words whispered by a 5-year-old girl. 5 words that would stop a billionaire in his tracks and expose a betrayal worth $9 billion. But here is what breaks my heart and what makes this story so powerful. That little girl was not supposed to be there at all. She was the daughter of a security guard, tucked into a quiet corner, trying with all her might to be invisible. And those 2 men in their expensive suits never even glanced her way. They truly believed no one was watching. They were wrong. This is the true story of how the smallest voice in the entire building became the loudest. How a child's honesty saved thousands of families from ruin. And how one whispered truth changed everything, not just for a company, but for one man who had long forgotten how to see the people around him. Stay with me, because what happens next will remind you why speaking up, even when your knees are shaking, even when you feel tiny, even when the whole world acts like you do not matter, is still the bravest thing any of us can ever do. This is Zoe's story, and it begins in the most unlikely place. Welcome to Voice of Tales. If you are new here, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you think of the story so far and where you are watching from. I read every single one. Let me tell you a story that will restore your faith in the power of honesty. It is about a little girl named Zoe, only 5 years old, who changed the life of one of the richest men on the planet. And she did it with just one sentence. This happened in downtown Seattle, inside one of those towering glass spires that slice straight through the low-hanging rain clouds. The building belonged to Velez Innovations, a technology giant worth billions. From the street it looked like a blade of light, all sharp edges and cold brilliance. Inside, everything was immaculate. Gleaming tile floors reflected every footstep. Modern art installations twisted and glowed in every atrium. People in crisp, perfectly tailored attire hurried past with tablets and coffee cups, looking absolutely indispensable. But Zoe did not belong there. Not really. She was the daughter of a security guard named Ava Hansen. Ava worked the late shift, the one that started when the executives had long gone home. She checked IDs at empty desks, walked silent corridors with a flashlight, and made sure the building stayed safe while the city slept. Ava was a single mother who juggled 2 other jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. She never complained, not once. Every night, no matter how tired she was, she still found energy to tuck Zoe in and spin bedtime adventures about brave little detectives who always told the truth and saved the day. That was the one rule Ava repeated more than any other: always share the truth, Zoe Bug. No matter how scary it feels, the truth is always the right path. On this particular gray Seattle afternoon, everything changed because Zoe's regular sitter woke up burning with fever. Ava had no family nearby, no backup plan, and rent was already 2 days late. She stood in the lobby in her dark blue security uniform, holding Zoe's tiny hand, and begged her supervisor. "She'll be quiet as a mouse," Ava promised. "I'll put her in the back hallway on 18. No one even uses that corridor in the afternoon. Please." The supervisor sighed, glanced at the small girl clutching a purple backpack almost as big as she was, and finally nodded. "One time only, Hansen. She stays out of sight." Ava found a plain wooden bench in a quiet passageway on the 18th floor, far from the executive suites and the busy elevators. She kissed the top of Zoe's curly head. "Remember our deal, baby. Sit right here. Be my invisible helper. Mama has to finish rounds, but I'll be back soon." Zoe nodded solemnly, her hazel eyes huge. "I'll be invisible, Mama. Promise." Ava hurried off, badge swinging at her hip, leaving Zoe alone on the bench. The little girl wore her favorite purple dress with tiny white stars and matching purple sneakers that lit up when she wiggled her feet. She swung her legs because they did not quite reach the floor, watching the lights blink on and off with every kick. She had promised to be good. She had promised to be invisible. Being invisible, however, is incredibly hard when you are 5 years old and the whole world feels like one giant mystery waiting to be solved. The hallway stretched long and quiet in both directions. Far away she could hear muffled voices and the occasional ding of an elevator. Rain slid in silver rivers down the tall windows, turning the city below into a blurry watercolor painting. Zoie decided this was not an office building at all. It was a secret fortress full of hidden treasures and locked doors that probably led to dragon lairs or spaceship control rooms. To pass the time, she started counting ceiling tiles. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 27 before she lost track and started over. She watched important-looking people stride past the mouth of the hallway without ever turning in her direction. Grown-ups, she had learned, rarely noticed children who stayed very still. She pretended she was the greatest detective in the world, assigned to guard the fortress. Detective Zoie and her invisible cape. Nothing escaped her sharp eyes. She counted the number of times the automatic lights flickered on when someone walked by. She tried to guess what might be inside each closed office door. One probably held a mountain of gold. Another definitely contained a sleeping robot waiting for the right password. Minutes stretched. The rain kept falling. Zoe's legs slowed their swinging. She hugged her backpack to her chest and rested her cheek against the cool wall, fighting the sleepy feeling that tugged at her eyelids. And then, everything changed. Footsteps. Fast ones. Coming closer. Two men appeared at the end of the passageway, moving quickly, shoulders hunched, heads turning to check behind them. They wore dark suits that looked expensive even to a 5-year-old's eyes. Something about the way they walked made Zoe's stomach feel funny, the same fluttery feeling she got when she watched the tense parts of cartoons right before the hero arrived. She froze, exactly the way small animals freeze when danger is near. She pulled her feet up onto the bench and made herself as small as possible, hugging her backpack tighter. The men never looked her way. To them, the hallway was empty. Zoe held her breath and watched. The footsteps grew louder, sharp and hurried against the polished floor, echoing down the long passageway like warning shots. Zoe pressed her back harder against the wall, her purple sneakers pulled up onto the bench so tightly that the little lights stopped blinking. She made herself smaller than small, smaller than she had ever tried to be before. The two men rounded the corner and stopped almost directly in front of her bench. One was tall and thin, all angles and nerves. His tie had loosened, and he kept dragging a folded handkerchief across his forehead, leaving faint damp streaks on the white cloth. His eyes darted left, right, behind him, everywhere except the tiny girl curled in the shadows. The other man was broader, heavier in the shoulders, carrying a compact black case with a bright yellow warning stripe across the lid. His face was flushed, but his movements were deliberate, controlled, like someone who had practiced this exact moment many times in his head. Zoe held her breath so completely that her chest began to ache. The slender man leaned in, voice low and trembling. "We have maybe 90 seconds. He'll be back any second." The bulkier one gave a tight nod. "Then stop panicking and keep watch." He set the case on the floor between them, fingers already working the combination locks. Click. Click. The lid lifted with a soft hiss. Zoe should have closed her eyes. She knew that. Good detectives sometimes had to look away. But she could not. Something inside her chest pulled her gaze forward, the same way it pulled her to peek during the scary parts of movies even when Mama covered her eyes. Inside the case, resting on dark foam, lay a tiny silver object no bigger than a matchbox. It gleamed under the hallway lights, catching every reflection like a captured star. The bulkier man lifted it carefully between thumb and forefinger. For one heartbeat he simply stared at it, almost like he hated it. Then he slipped it into the inside pocket of his overcoat, right over his heart. From another pocket he produced a second object. This one looked almost the same from a distance, but duller, cheaper, the kind of thing that belonged in a discount store rather than a billionaire's tower. He placed it into the empty space in the foam, adjusted it once, twice, until it sat perfectly. Zoe's heart hammered so loudly she was sure they would hear it. The slender man glanced at his watch and whispered again, voice cracking. "Hurry." "Done," the bulkier one answered. He closed the lid, spun the locks, and stood. Both men let out long, shaky breaths at the exact same moment. He'll never detect the difference, the slender one said, trying to sound confident and failing completely. Not until it's too late. They grabbed the case and moved, fast, silent, expensive shoes whispering over tile as they disappeared around the far corner. The hallway fell quiet again. Only the rain remained, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. Zoe stayed frozen long after they were gone. Her whole body trembled. She did not understand everything she had just seen, not the way grown-ups would, but she understood enough. Those men had taken something that did not belong to them. They had replaced it with something fake. They had smiled while doing it, small, secret smiles that made her skin crawl. Mama's voice floated through her mind, soft but steady, the same words she heard every single night. Some things are more important than being quiet, Zoe Bug. Some things are more important than being safe. If you see something wrong, really wrong, you tell the truth. Even if your voice shakes. Especially if your voice shakes. Zoe's eyes filled with hot, sudden tears. She pressed her knuckles against her mouth to keep any sound from escaping. The hallway stretched empty in both directions now, colder than before. She stared at the spot where the men had stood, at the faint scuff mark left by the case on the gleaming floor. Her mind raced in frantic 5-year-old circles. What if no one believed her? What if they came back and found her? What if whatever they stole hurt someone? Hurt a lot of someone's? She was only 5. She was supposed to be invisible. Invisible girls were not supposed to see secrets this big. Zoe hugged her backpack to her chest and rocked forward, whispering to herself the way Mama did when nightmares came. Truth is always the right path. Truth is always the right path. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, time felt slippery. The rain kept falling. Far away an elevator dinged, soft and ordinary. The door slid open. A man stepped out. He was tall, taller than any daddy she had ever seen, with dark hair touched with silver at the sides. His suit was the color of midnight, perfect, expensive, the kind that grown-ups on television wore when they owned the whole world. One hand held a tablet, his eyes stayed on the glowing screen as he walked, thumb flicking through messages that probably decided the fates of thousands. He would have passed right by the bench without ever noticing the tiny girl huddled there. But then Zoe made the smallest sound, half sob, half gasp, impossible to hold back any longer. The man stopped. His head turned slowly. He looked down the hallway, first one way, then the other, as if trying to locate the source of the noise. His gaze finally landed on the bench, on the purple dress and trembling knees and wide, frightened hazel eyes that could not look away. Something shifted in his expression. The hard, focused lines softened all at once. He slipped the tablet into his pocket and walked toward her, not fast, not slow, the way you approach a spooked deer you do not want to startle. When he reached her, he crouched down so they were eye to eye. Up close he smelled faintly of cedar and rain. His voice, when it came, was surprisingly gentle. "Hey there, sweetheart," Alexis Velez said, billionaire, founder, ruler of the entire tower. "Are you okay?" Zoe stared at him, tears finally spilling over. Her lower lip quivered. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. And somewhere inside her tiny, terrified, brave heart, she found the 5 words that would change everything. Zoe stared at the man crouched in front of her, his dark eyes steady and kind in a way that felt almost unfamiliar in this towering building of glass and steel. Her throat tightened. The words sat right there on her tongue, heavy and burning, but fear wrapped cold fingers around her chest. What if he laughed? What if he got angry? What if he told her little girls should stay quiet and invisible the way everyone else seemed to expect? She pictured Mama's face, tired but fierce, repeating the same promise every night: truth is always the right path, Zoe Bug. Even when your knees knock together. Zoe swallowed once, twice. The tears kept sliding down her cheeks, but her voice, when it finally came, was the smallest whisper in the whole wide world. "I saw them switch the item," she breathed. "The one with the yellow label. They said you'd never detect." The man went completely still. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire universe. The rain outside slowed. The distant hum of the building faded. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Alexis Velez felt the floor tilt beneath him. $9 billion. Years of research. A merger that would secure thousands of jobs and reshape entire industries. All of it balanced on a single prototype chip locked inside a case with a yellow warning stripe. A case that had left his office less than an hour ago in the hands of two trusted directors. He stared at the child in the purple dress, at the terror and certainty warring in those hazel eyes, and something ancient and protective stirred inside his chest. Slowly, carefully, he lowered himself to one knee so they were exactly the same height. "Sweetheart," he said, voice soft as falling snow, "can you tell me everything you saw? Every single detail. I promise I will listen." Zoe's lower lip trembled. She glanced down the empty hallway as if the men might come back any second, then looked at the hand he still held out, steady and open. Something about that hand, large and strong and unafraid, made the words tumble out faster. "There were two guys," she began, her voice shaking but growing braver with each syllable. "One was really tall and super skinny, and he kept wiping his face like this." She dragged an invisible handkerchief across her forehead. "The other one was bigger and he had the box with the yellow tag. They kept looking behind them like they were scared of being caught." Alexis felt ice slide down his spine, but he kept his face calm, gentle, the way you speak to a frightened bird you desperately want to trust you. "They opened the box right here," Zoe continued, pointing to the exact spot on the floor. "The skinny one said you were coming back soon. The big one took out a shiny little thing, super shiny, like treasure, and he put it in his pocket, right here." She patted the left side of her chest. "Then he put a different one inside the box. It looked the same but it wasn't shiny at all. It was boring and gray. And then they closed it and said," her voice dropped to the tiniest thread, "they said you'd never detect the difference." Alexis closed his eyes for one heartbeat. Derek Sloan and Nathan Cole. Two men he had personally promoted. Two men he had trusted with the future of Velez Innovations. He opened his eyes again and found Zoe watching him, waiting, terrified he would call her a liar. Instead he reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You did the right thing telling me," he said firmly. "The bravest thing. There is no trouble for you, little one. Only thank you. You have helped me more than you will ever know." Zoe blinked, confused and relieved all at once. "Really? Really?" He managed a small, genuine smile. "What is your name?" "Zoe," she whispered. "Zoie Hansen." "Zoie Hansen," he repeated, as if the name itself was something sacred. "Will you come with me for a little while? I need to keep you safe until I find your mom. I promise she will be here soon." He offered his hand again. This time Zoe did not hesitate. Her small fingers slipped into his much larger ones, warm and trusting. Together they walked toward the private elevator at the end of the hall. Alexis kept his strides slow to match her shorter legs. As the doors closed behind them, he tapped his tablet with his free hand. "Security to my office. Full team. Now. And find Ava Hansen, night shift guard. Tell her daughter is safe with me. Bring her immediately." The ride to the top floor took less than 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Zoe stared up at the glowing numbers climbing higher and higher, clutching his hand like a lifeline. When the doors opened directly into his private office, Zoe's mouth fell open. The room was bigger than her entire apartment. One entire wall was glass, looking out over the gray water of Puget Sound and the misty city beyond. Plush cream couches faced a fireplace that flickered with real flames. A massive desk sat in the center like the control panel of a spaceship. Alexis led her to the longest couch and lifted her onto the soft leather so her feet dangled. "Make yourself comfortable, Detective Zoe. You have earned it." Within minutes the office filled with people. Security personnel in dark suits fanned out along the walls. Advisors and lawyers hurried in with tablets and worried expressions. And then the door flew open again and Ava Hansen ran in, uniform jacket half-zipped, face pale with terror. "Zoe," she cried, dropping to her knees the moment she spotted her daughter. Zoe launched off the couch and into her mother's arms. Ava held her so tightly Zoe could barely breathe, rocking her back and forth, tears streaming down both their faces. "I'm sorry, Mama," Zoe mumbled into her mother's shoulder. "I tried to be invisible." Ava pulled back just enough to cup Zoe's cheeks. "Baby, what happened?" Before Zoe could answer, Alexis stepped forward. His voice cut through the room, calm but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "Ms. Hansen, your daughter is safe. And she may have just saved this company." He gestured to the head of security. "Roll the footage." The massive screen on the wall came to life. Grainy hallway footage showed exactly what Zoe had described: Derek Sloan and Nathan Cole, nervous and hurried, opening the case, making the switch, sealing it again. Every movement matched the child's words perfectly. Ava's hand flew to her mouth. She stared at the screen, then at her daughter, then at the billionaire who watched them both with something that looked very much like awe. "Those are junior directors," the security chief said quietly. "Derek Sloan and Nathan Cole. For years with the company." Alexis's expression hardened into steel. "Not anymore." He turned to the room. "I want them located and detained within the next 10 minutes. Full forensic audit on every file they have touched in the last 6 months. And someone get legal on the line. This is corporate sabotage at the highest level." Men and women scattered to obey. Only then did Alexis turn back to the mother and daughter clinging to each other on the floor. He crouched again, bringing himself to their level. "Ms. Hansen," he said gently, "Zoe saw something no one else did. She spoke up when it would have been easier, and far safer, to stay quiet. Because of her, thousands of families will keep their jobs. Because of her, a $9 billion betrayal has been stopped before it began." Ava could only shake her head, tears falling faster. "She's 5, she whispered, as if that explained everything. Alexis looked at Zoe, still half hidden in her mother's arms, and felt something crack open inside him, something he had not even realized was sealed shut. "Yes," he said softly. "She is 5. And today she was the bravest person in this building." Zoe peeked out at him, eyes red but steady. Alexis smiled, small and real and a little shaky. "Welcome to the team, Detective Zoe. We are going to need you." Alexis rose slowly from his crouch, the warmth in his eyes replaced by something cold and unbreakable. He turned to the security team still waiting for orders. "Those 2 men are finished here," he said, voice flat and final. "Find Derek Sloan and Nathan Cole. Bring them to the holding floor. No statements, no phone calls, no contact with anyone until legal arrives. I want full federal charges. Corporate fraud, theft of trade secrets, conspiracy. Maximum prosecution. Move." The room erupted into motion. Boots hit marble, radios crackled, doors slammed. Within seconds the office felt enormous and empty again, only the low hum of the fireplace and the rain against glass remaining. Alexis exhaled, long and slow, then turned back to the mother and daughter on the floor. The steel in his posture melted away as if it had never existed. He knelt once more, this time resting one knee fully on the carpet so he was lower than both of them. Ava still held Zoe tight, rocking slightly, trying to process everything that had just happened in the space of a few heartbeats. Alexis spoke softly, directly to Ava, but loud enough for Zoe to hear every word. "I owe you both more than I can ever repay," he said. "Your daughter showed courage today that most adults in this building have never managed once in their lives. She could have stayed quiet. It would have been safer. Easier. No one would have blamed her. But she spoke anyway." Ava's voice cracked. "I just taught her to tell the truth. That's all. It's the one thing that I could always give her." "That," Alexis replied, "is everything." He looked at Zoe, who had pulled back just enough to study his face with wide, curious eyes. Zoie Hansen, he said, solemn as a knighthood, you are a hero. Do you know what that word means? Zoie shook her head, curls bouncing. It means you saved people, he told her. Thousands of them. Mommies and daddies who work here. Kids who need school and food and safe homes. All because you were brave enough to use your voice when it mattered most. Zoe's mouth formed a small, wondering O. Then, slowly, a shy smile crept across her face, the kind that starts in the eyes and spills over everything else. It was small and crooked and perfect. That smile hit Alexis harder than any boardroom victory ever had. Something thick and long buried shifted behind his ribs. For the first time in years he felt the walls he had built around himself tremble. He felt human. He reached out and gently tapped the tip of her nose. Thank you, Detective Zoe. Zoe giggled, the sound bright and sudden in the heavy room. Ava wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, laughing through fresh tears. I still can't believe this is real. It's real, Alexis promised. And it's only beginning. He stood, offered Ava a hand up, and watched mother and daughter rise together. Security would escort them home soon, with protection detail for the night, just in case. Tomorrow the world would start to change for them. But tonight there was still work to do. The arrests happened faster than anyone expected. Derek Sloan was taken in the parking garage, halfway to his car, face going white when 4 armed guards stepped out from behind the concrete pillars. Nathan Cole was pulled from a conference room on the 23rd floor, mid-sentence in a budget meeting, the projector still glowing behind him. Both men were silent as they were cuffed, though Sloan's knees buckled so badly he had to be held upright. By 8 o'clock that evening the news was sealed behind legal lockdowns and non-disclosure agreements, but inside the building it spread like wildfire. Whispers in stairwells. Wide eyes over coffee stations. A 5-year-old girl had brought down 2 rising stars in less than an hour. And on the 60th floor, in a penthouse that took up the entire top of the tower, Alexis Velez could not sleep. He stood at the curved wall of glass, city lights glittering far below like scattered jewels on black velvet. Puget Sound stretched beyond, dark and endless, reflecting a half-moon that hung low and silver. Usually this view made him feel untouchable, like a god surveying his kingdom. Tonight it only reminded him how high up he was, how far removed from everyone who made the kingdom run. He had poured himself a drink hours ago. The glass sat untouched on the marble counter. His mind replayed the afternoon in relentless loops. The hallway. The tiny girl in purple. The whispered sentence that had shattered a betrayal he never saw coming. He thought of Sloan and Cole, men he had shaken hands with, men he had praised in front of the entire executive team. Men who had smiled back while planning to sell him out for whatever price had been whispered in their ears. Cowards in $1,000 suits. And then there was Zoe. 5 years old. Terrified. Alone. And still brave enough to speak. Alexis pressed his forehead to the cool glass and closed his eyes. How many times had he walked past security desks without learning a single name? How many nights had Ava Hansen patrolled these corridors while he slept 3 floors above, never once wondering what her life was like? 9 years. 9 years she had worn the same uniform, scanned the same badges, kept his empire safe. And until today he had never known she existed. He thought of the cleaners who arrived after midnight, the maintenance crews who fixed leaks before he ever noticed them, the cafeteria workers who smiled and served coffee to people who never bothered to smile back. Invisible. All of them. Just like Zoe had tried to be. His reflection stared back at him in the window, older than he remembered, lines etched deep around eyes that had spent too long looking at spreadsheets and stock tickers instead of people. He had built all of this, every floor, every patent, every billion, on being the smartest man in the room. On noticing details others missed. On staying 3 steps ahead. And a 5-year-old girl had just shown him how blind he had become. Alexis set the untouched glass down hard enough to make it ring. The sound echoed through the empty penthouse like a gunshot. Tomorrow the investigators would dig. Tomorrow the lawyers would descend. Tomorrow the headlines would start, carefully managed, of course, but impossible to silence completely. But tonight there was only the rain and the moon and a little girl's smile cracking open something inside him he had not even realized was locked. He stayed at the window until the city lights began to dim, one by one, and the first edge of dawn bled pale gray across the water. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Alexis Velez did not feel like the most powerful man in Seattle. He felt small. And strangely, terrifyingly alive. The sky over Seattle was still the color of wet ash when Alexis stepped into the war room at 4:47 a.m. The long table was already ringed by 11 faces, some bleary, some pale, all summoned by the single message he had sent 4 hours earlier: be here. No excuses. He did not sit at the head. He stood. Yesterday, he began without greeting. This company came within minutes of losing everything. A $9 billion alliance. Tens of thousands of jobs. Our reputation. All of it nearly vanished because two men we trusted decided betrayal paid better than loyalty. A ripple of unease moved around the table. Phones stayed dark, no one dared check them. We survived, Alexis continued, because of one person none of us have ever met. A night shift security guard making $14 an hour. Or rather, her 5-year-old daughter. He let that settle. A few executives exchanged glances, waiting for the punchline that never came. She sat in a hallway she was never meant to be in. She watched. She listened. And when the moment came, she told the truth. That is the entire story. Someone cleared his throat. Sir, with respect, a child. Alexis raised one hand, and the room fell silent again. He tapped the remote. The hallway footage filled the wall screen, Sloan and Cole, the case, the switch, the whispered arrogance. Then the camera angle shifted to the bench, revealing a tiny figure in purple, motionless, eyes huge. Watch her face, Alexis said quietly. Watch how she understands wrong when she sees it. Watch how she chooses to speak anyway. The room watched. No one moved until the clip ended. That child, Alexis said, turning back to them, saw what none of us did. She was paying attention with eyes that have never been taught to look away. We walk these halls every day and see nothing. We have become experts at not seeing. He let the silence stretch until it hurt. That ends now. He laid out the orders like stones across the table. Full cultural audit. Every department. Every shift. I want to know if people feel valued. I want to know if they feel safe raising their hand when something is wrong. I want to know if they believe their voice matters. Anonymous channels, third-party facilitators, whatever it takes. If a 5-year-old has to save us because we are too busy or too proud to notice rot in our own house, then the rot starts at the top. He paused, scanning each face. Starting today. Then he moved to the part some of them had been dreading. Zoie Hansen receives a new contract. Day shift. Full benefits. Salary doubled immediately, with a promotion to Facilities Oversight Coordinator. Her daughter Zoe will be enrolled in the company education trust, full ride from kindergarten through graduate school if she wants it. I will personally guarantee it. A senior VP shifted in his seat. Alexis, that's generous, but precedent. Precedent? Alexis's voice cut clean. You're worried about precedent? Good. Let every parent on the night shift hear that if their child saves this company, we take care of them for life. Let every employee hear that loyalty and courage are worth more here than any corner office. If that scares some people, let them go somewhere else. He leaned forward, palms flat on the table. 22 years ago I started this company in a studio apartment with a second-hand laptop and no heat. I knew every name. I knew every story. Somewhere along the way I forgot. Zoe reminded me that every person who walks through our doors is someone's everything. I am not losing that lesson again. The room was so quiet they could hear the rain on the windows 40 floors up. Meeting adjourned. Some executives filed out energized, already drafting memos. Others left pale, sensing the ground shifting beneath careers built on different rules. Alexis did not watch them go. He already knew which ones would stay and which ones would quietly circulate resumes by noon. At 7:15 the private elevator opened again, and Ava Hansen stepped out holding Zoe's hand. Ava's uniform was pressed, but her eyes were ringed with exhaustion and something close to disbelief. Zoe wore a clean yellow dress and clutched the purple backpack like a shield. Alexis met them halfway across the marble floor. He did not wait for Ava to speak. He simply knelt, bringing himself eye level with Zoe. "Good morning, detective," he said, soft enough that only the three of them could hear. Zoe gave a tiny, solemn nod. "Good morning, Mr. Alexis." Ava started to curtsy, caught herself, and settled for an awkward half-bow. "Sir, I don't know what to say. If this is about yesterday, I can explain." "It's not about yesterday," Alexis cut in gently. "It's about tomorrow. And all the tomorrows after that." He stood and led them to the expanse of glass that overlooked the city. Dawn was finally breaking, painting the Olympics in pale rose and gold. "Look out there, Zoe," he said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "All those buildings you can see? Thousands and thousands of people are waking up right now. They're making breakfast for their kids. They're packing lunches. They're getting on buses and trains so they can come here and do their jobs. Because of what you did yesterday, every single one of those people still has a paycheck next week. Their kids still have doctors and schools and safe places to sleep. You protected them." Zoe pressed both palms to the glass, nose almost touching it, eyes enormous. "There's so many," she whispered. "Yes," Alexis said. "And every one of them matters." He glanced at Ava, who had tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "Your new contract is being printed right now," he told her. "Day shifts only. No more nights away from Zoe. Salary more than double. Full health, dental, child care, the works. And Zoe's education trust is already funded. If she wants to be a detective, a doctor, an astronaut, whatever she dreams, it's covered." Ava's knees actually buckled. Alexis caught her elbow before she hit the floor. "I can't, sir, this is too much." "It's not even close to enough," he replied. "But it's a start." Zoe tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Alexis?" "Yes?" "Are you still sad?" The question landed like a pebble in still water, sending ripples straight through him. He crouched again. "Why do you think I'm sad?" "'Cause yesterday you didn't smile." "Not really. Mama says when grown-ups stop smiling they forget how to be happy." Alexis felt the air leave his lungs. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. "I was forgetting," he admitted. "But you helped me remember." Zoe considered this with grave 5-year-old seriousness, then nodded once, satisfied. Ava laughed through her tears and pulled her daughter close. "What do we say, baby?" Zoe looked up at Alexis, eyes shining. "Thank you for believing me." Alexis swallowed hard. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell me." He stood, and for the first time in years he felt the full weight of the empire he had built, and the terrifying, beautiful responsibility of every life it touched. Outside, the sun finally cleared the mountains, spilling gold across the water and across the city and across 3 people standing together at the top of the world. A new day had begun. #### Chapter 6, Rewards and Reflections. Zoe tilted her head, curls catching the first rays of sunlight that spilled across the office floor like warm honey. She studied Alexis with the unflinching honesty only children possess. "Are you still empty?" she asked, small brow creasing. Alexis felt the question land directly in the center of his chest. "Empty?" Zoe nodded solemnly. "Mama says when grown-ups stop smiling for a long time, they get empty inside. Like a balloon with no air." Ava's breath caught. She started to hush her daughter, but Alexis lifted a gentle hand to stop her. He lowered himself to one knee again, the carpet soft beneath him, and looked Zoe straight in the eye. "You're right," he said quietly. I had forgotten how to fill back up. But you, Miss Zoie Hansen, you're helping me remember. A shy, dazzling grin broke across her face, the kind that lit the entire room brighter than the sunrise outside. Ava wiped fresh tears with the sleeve of her uniform, laughing and crying at once. Alexis rose and turned to her. The promises I made this morning stand, he told her. New contract, day shifts only, full medical, child care, retirement match, the whole package. And paid leave you can actually take without fear. None of this is charity. It's justice, long overdue. Ava opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Mr. Velez, Nothing is required in return, he said, cutting her off gently. Your daughter gave us something worth more than any merger I've ever signed. She gave us truth when it mattered most. That is the rarest currency in this building. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and drew out a small velvet box. Kneeling once more, he opened it for Zoie. Inside rested a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. The face of the locket was engraved with a tiny, perfect compass rose, the needle pointing forever north. This is for you, he said. Because even the smallest guide can show the biggest ship the right way home. You were my compass yesterday. Zoe's eyes went round as moons. She lifted the necklace with reverent fingers, the silver catching every shard of morning light. It's the prettiest thing I ever saw, she whispered. Alexis fastened it around her neck. The compass rested just above her heart. Ava watched through a shimmer of tears, one hand pressed to her mouth. Alexis stood slowly, feeling the weight of 22 years of climbing and striving settle into something new. He had spent more than 2 decades chasing the next deal, the next zero on the balance sheet, convinced that the view from the top would be enough. Kneeling on his own office carpet in front of a 5-year-old in a yellow dress, he finally understood what the view was supposed to look like. True wealth, he realized, was this: the shine in a brave child's eyes, the trembling relief on a mother's face, the quiet knowledge that someone who had always been invisible was now seen, truly seen, for the first time. By noon the story had spread through Velez Innovations like sparks on dry grass. It started as whispers in the third-floor lounge. A little girl. A security guard's daughter. She saw the switch. She told the boss himself. By 1 o'clock it was in every elevator, every break room, every restroom stall. Phones buzzed under desks. Someone leaked a blurry still from the hallway footage, just enough to show a tiny figure on a bench and 2 suited men who no longer worked there. The legend grew with every telling. Some said she was 4. Some swore she marched straight into the boardroom. The heart of it, though, stayed pure. A child chose truth over silence, and the entire tower felt the earthquake. Alexis did not try to contain it. He let it burn. That same afternoon he began walking the building the way he had not walked it in 15 years. No entourage, no assistant, just him and an open collar. He started in the basement parking garage and worked his way up, floor by floor, corridor by corridor. He stopped at the security desk where Carlos had stood for 14 years without ever missing a shift. Carlos, he said, reading the name tag for the first time, tell me about your granddaughter. The one starting college, right? Carlos blinked, stunned, then beamed so wide his eyes disappeared into crescents. He found Lucia in the mailroom, sorting packages with the speed of someone who knew every employee by face and favorite coffee order. Lucia, your son's band plays downtown, doesn't it? I'd love to hear them sometime. He sat with Javier, the maintenance supervisor, while Javier showed him photos of the irrigation system he had jury-rigged for the rooftop garden no one in management had ever noticed. Names. Stories. Lives. People he had passed 1,000 times without seeing. By the end of the week the executive floor felt different. Memos flew about new feedback channels that actually stayed anonymous. Pay bands for entry-level and support staff were quietly, drastically adjusted upward. A real open-door policy was drafted, not the kind that existed only on posters. Some of the old guard pushed back in private meetings. We're turning this place into a charity, one VP hissed. It's not sustainable. Alexis looked at him across the polished table and answered with winter in his voice. What's not sustainable is treating human beings like replaceable parts. If that's your philosophy, there are plenty of companies still hiring dinosaurs. This one isn't. 4 senior executives tendered resignations before the month was out. Alexis signed the paperwork without comment and promoted from within, people who had been waiting years for someone to notice they were ready. He was rebuilding, not the balance sheet, but the soul of the place. And every evening, when the building grew quiet and the city lights came on, he thought of a small silver compass resting against a brave heart, pointing north. The tower had not fallen. It had only just begun to rise the right way. Zoe tilted her head, curls catching the first rays of sunlight that spilled across the office floor like warm honey. She studied Alexis with the unflinching honesty only children possess. Are you still empty? She asked, small brow creasing. Alexis felt the question land directly in the center of his chest. Empty? Zoe nodded solemnly. Mama says when grown-ups stop smiling for a long time, they get empty inside. Like a balloon with no air. Ava's breath caught. She started to hush her daughter, but Alexis lifted a gentle hand to stop her. He lowered himself to one knee again, the carpet soft beneath him, and looked Zoe straight in the eye. You're right, he said quietly. I had forgotten how to fill back up. But you, Miss Zoie Hansen, you're helping me remember. A shy, dazzling grin broke across her face, the kind that lit the entire room brighter than the sunrise outside. Ava wiped fresh tears with the sleeve of her uniform, laughing and crying at once. Alexis rose and turned to her. The promises I made this morning stand, he told her. New contract, day shifts only, full medical, child care, retirement match, the whole package. And paid leave you can actually take without fear. None of this is charity. It's justice, long overdue. Ava opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Mr. Velez, Nothing is required in return, he said, cutting her off gently. Your daughter gave us something worth more than any merger I've ever signed. She gave us truth when it mattered most. That is the rarest currency in this building. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and drew out a small velvet box. Kneeling once more, he opened it for Zoe. Inside rested a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. The face of the locket was engraved with a tiny, perfect compass rose, the needle pointing forever north. This is for you, he said. Because even the smallest guide can show the biggest ship the right way home. You were my compass yesterday. Zoe's eyes went round as moons. She lifted the necklace with reverent fingers, the silver catching every shard of morning light. It's the prettiest thing I ever saw, she whispered. Alexis fastened it around her neck. The compass rested just above her heart. Ava watched through a shimmer of tears, one hand pressed to her mouth. Alexis stood slowly, feeling the weight of 22 years of climbing and striving settle into something new. He had spent more than 2 decades chasing the next deal, the next zero on the balance sheet, convinced that the view from the top would be enough. Kneeling on his own office carpet in front of a 5-year-old in a yellow dress, he finally understood what the view was supposed to look like. True wealth, he realized, was this, the shine in a brave child's eyes, the trembling relief on a mother's face, the quiet knowledge that someone who had always been invisible was now seen, truly seen, for the first time. By noon the story had spread through Velez Innovations like sparks on dry grass. It started as whispers in the third-floor lounge. A little girl. A security guard's daughter. She saw the switch. She told the boss himself. By 1 o'clock it was in every elevator, every break room, every restroom stall. Phones buzzed under desks. Someone leaked a blurry still from the hallway footage, just enough to show a tiny figure on a bench and 2 suited men who no longer worked there. The legend grew with every telling. Some said she was 4. Some swore she marched straight into the boardroom. The heart of it, though, stayed pure. A child chose truth over silence, and the entire tower felt the earthquake. Alexis did not try to contain it. He let it burn. That same afternoon he began walking the building the way he had not walked it in 15 years. No entourage, no assistant, just him and an open collar. He started in the basement parking garage and worked his way up, floor by floor, corridor by corridor. He stopped at the security desk where Carlos had stood for 14 years without ever missing a shift. "Carlos," he said, reading the name tag for the first time, "tell me about your granddaughter. The one starting college, right?" Carlos blinked, stunned, then beamed so wide his eyes disappeared into crescents. He found Lucia in the mailroom, sorting packages with the speed of someone who knew every employee by face and favorite coffee order. "Lucia, your son's band plays downtown, doesn't it? I'd love to hear them sometime." He sat with Javier, the maintenance supervisor, while Javier showed him photos of the irrigation system he had jury-rigged for the rooftop garden no one in management had ever noticed. Names. Stories. Lives. People he had passed 1,000 times without seeing. By the end of the week the executive floor felt different. Memos flew about new feedback channels that actually stayed anonymous. Pay bands for entry-level and support staff were quietly, drastically adjusted upward. A real open-door policy was drafted, not the kind that existed only on posters. Some of the old guard pushed back in private meetings. "We're turning this place into a charity," one VP hissed. "It's not sustainable." Alexis looked at him across the polished table and answered with winter in his voice. "What's not sustainable is treating human beings like replaceable parts. If that's your philosophy, there are plenty of companies still hiring dinosaurs. This one isn't." Four senior executives tendered resignations before the month was out. Alexis signed the paperwork without comment and promoted from within, people who had been waiting years for someone to notice they were ready. He was rebuilding, not the balance sheet, but the soul of the place. And every evening, when the building grew quiet and the city lights came on, he thought of a small silver compass resting against a brave heart, pointing north. The tower had not fallen. It had only just begun to rise the right way. The first paycheck arrived on a Thursday, and Ava sat at the kitchen table staring at it for so long that Zoe climbed into her lap, worried. "Mama, why are you crying at numbers?" Ava laughed through the tears and hugged her daughter so hard the paper crinkled. "Because these numbers mean we never have to choose between rent and groceries again, baby. These numbers mean you get new shoes whenever you need them. These numbers mean Mama gets to tuck you in every single night." Zoe considered this with grave importance, then kissed her mother's wet cheek. "That's good crying, then." It was good crying. The best kind. The new job title, Facilities Oversight Coordinator, sounded fancy, but mostly it meant Ava walked the building in daylight now, clipboard in hand, talking to people instead of shadows. She scheduled shifts, ordered supplies, listened to complaints about broken air conditioning or flickering lights, and fixed them before anyone on the upper floors ever noticed a problem. For the first time in 9 years, she left work while the sun was still up and arrived home before Zoe's bedtime. The company daycare and after-school hub sat on the 4th floor, a bright explosion of color and laughter tucked behind frosted glass. Zoe bounded in each afternoon like a small comet, purple backpack bouncing, immediately surrounded by new friends who had heard the story and treated her like a living legend. There were art tables, reading lofts, a miniature climbing wall, and teachers who called every child by name. On Fridays they had pajama movie days with real popcorn. Zoe blossomed. She made best friends with a quiet boy named Mateo who loved dinosaurs, and a fearless girl named Sari who wore superhero capes to school. She learned to write her full name in big, proud letters. She drew pictures of the tower with a tiny girl in purple standing on the roof holding a giant silver compass. And everywhere they went now, people noticed. Security guards who once walked past Ava without a glance now grinned and offered fist bumps to Zoe as she skipped by. Receptionists waved. Even the serious men and women in suits paused to say hello. Zoe's compass necklace caught the light whenever she passed, and strangers smiled like they were in on the best secret in the world. She became the building's quiet mascot, proof that doing the right thing still mattered. Once a week, every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, Zoie took the private elevator to the top floor. The guards waved her through with conspiratorial grins. She marched into Alexis's office in whatever bright dress she had chosen that day, backpack slung over one shoulder, and plopped herself into the enormous leather chair he kept pulled up beside his desk just for her. On the first warm Tuesday in April she arrived in a sundress the color of fresh oranges, sandals slapping happily against the marble. "Mr. Alexis," she announced, climbing up without waiting for an invitation. "I brought charts." He laughed, the sound startling his assistant in the outer office. Charts, it turned out, were crayon drawings of stick figure families holding hands under rainbow umbrellas labeled "Happy because Zoie told truth." Alexis taped every single one to the glass wall behind his desk until the city skyline had a border of orange suns and purple heroes. On the big monitor he pulled up simple graphs he had made just for her, bar charts in bright colors showing almost 5,000 employees, tiny cartoon houses representing families who still had jobs because of what she had done. "See this tall blue bar?" he asked, pointing. "That's mommies and daddies who can pay rent this month. This green one is kids who get to stay in their schools. This yellow one is birthday parties that still happen." Zoie leaned forward, nose almost touching the screen. "That's a lot of happy." "All because you were brave," he said softly. She turned to him, head tilted again in that way that always made his heart stutter. "Mr. Alexis, why didn't the other grown-ups see the bad men?" The question hung in the air like a bell that would not stop ringing. He thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes grown-ups get very busy," he said at last. "We start thinking we already know everything, so we stop really looking. We walk the same halls every day and forget to notice what's new or what's wrong. You reminded me that we have to keep our eyes open. Always." Zoie nodded slowly, accepting this with the gravity of a judge. "I will keep my eyes open forever," she declared. Alexis felt something thick rise in his throat. He held out his hand, pinky extended. "Promise?" he asked. Zoie hooked her tiny pinky around his. "Promise. I'll always tell the truth even when it's scary. And I'll watch for bad stuff. The world needs more watchers, right?" "The world needs more you," he said, voice rough. They shook on it, pinkies locked, the most solemn contract he had ever signed. When Ava came to collect her an hour later, Zoie skipped out chattering about bar graphs and promises, leaving Alexis alone at the window. He watched the sun sink behind the Olympics, painting the sky in fire and rose, and felt something settle inside him that had been restless for years. Hope, maybe. The kind that did not come from market shares or new patents, but from the certainty that tomorrow could be better than today if someone was willing to see clearly and speak honestly. 6 months slipped by like warm rain. Summer arrived gentle and bright, the kind of Seattle summer people bragged about for the rest of the year. The tower itself seemed to breathe differently. Elevators carried laughter instead of silence. People held doors without being asked. Birthdays appeared on the digital boards in the lobby with cheerful animations no one had programmed before. Employee satisfaction scores climbed to numbers the consultants could not explain. Productivity rose, but no one was quite sure why until someone noticed that people simply wanted to be there now. The support staff received the biggest raises anyone could remember. Night cleaning crews were brought onto day schedules with full benefits. The suggestion boxes, once ignored, overflowed with handwritten notes that were actually read and answered. Alexis kept walking the floors. He learned that Carlos's granddaughter had been accepted to Stanford. He attended Lucia's son's very first paid gig at a downtown club and cheered louder than anyone. He promoted Javier to head of building operations and watched the man's eyes fill with tears of disbelief. The company did not become perfect. There were still deadlines and disagreements and the ordinary friction of thousands of humans sharing space. But the temperature had changed. It felt like a place where people belonged, not just worked. And at the center of it all, small and fierce and fearless, was a little girl in bright dresses and light-up shoes who had reminded an entire tower how to see. Alexis stood at the window of his office on a quiet Tuesday in early June and looked down at the tower that no longer felt like a monument to his own ambition. It looked alive. Real windows glowed with real lives. The rooftop garden Javier had coaxed from concrete now spilled green over the edges, visible even from 60 floors up. Delivery trucks came and went without the old frantic rush. People walked in and out smiling, some carrying children on their shoulders, others holding hands with partners who had never been allowed past the lobby before. He had thought success would feel like this from the beginning, cold, perfect, untouchable. Instead it had felt hollow, a beautiful shell echoing with his own footsteps. Now the shell had cracked open and something warmer, messier, and infinitely better had poured in. The security teams no longer vanished into the night. They worked alongside everyone else, uniforms crisp in daylight, names embroidered where once there had only been numbers. Maintenance, catering, mailroom, reception, every role that used to be background scenery now stood in the light. Salaries reflected it. Benefits matched it. Respect demanded it. The press noticed first. A cautiously worded article appeared in the business section. Velez Innovations quietly becomes the best place in Seattle to work below the C-suite. Then another. Then a flood. Harvard wanted case studies. Stanford sent researchers. Competing firms announced culture initiatives and people-first strategies, but most of them rang hollow because you cannot fake dignity. You either believe people matter or you don't. Alexis believed now. Zoie had made sure of that. On a sunny Saturday in the middle of June, the company park, 3 rolling acres the city had never known existed, opened its gates for the first time to every employee and every member of their families. 5,000 people poured in under blue sky and cotton clouds. Food trucks lined the perimeter, tacos, ice cream, barbecue, vegan bowls, kettle corn. A stage thumped with live music from Lucia's son's band. Carnival games, face painting, a bounce castle the size of a small house. Balloons bobbed everywhere, tethered to wrists and strollers and the occasional very excited grandparent. Alexis walked through it all in jeans and a plain white shirt, no tie, no jacket, no assistant trailing 3 steps behind. People did double takes, then grinned and waved. Children ran up to shake his hand because their parents had told them he was the man who listened to little girls. He stopped at the cotton candy stand where Javier's niece, age 7 and fearless, was trying to win a stuffed dragon twice her size. Javier himself stood nearby, eyes shining with pride. "She's got my aim," Javier laughed, clapping Alexis on the shoulder like an old friend. "Watch this." 3 throws later the dragon was hers. She hugged it, then hugged Alexis without hesitation, sticky fingers and all. He found Lucia on the dance lawn, twirling with her husband to a song they had danced to at their wedding 30 years earlier. She kissed both his cheeks and whispered, "Thank you for giving us this day." Carlos, retired from night shifts but still unable to stay away, sat on a picnic blanket surrounded by grandchildren, telling them the story of the bravest 5-year-old in Seattle. When he spotted Alexis he stood, came to attention out of habit, then laughed at himself and pulled Alexis into a backslapping hug instead. These were his people. Not assets. Not headcount. People he had almost lost because he had stopped seeing them. He wandered until laughter, high, bright, unmistakable, drew him to the playground area. There, flying down the twisty slide over and over, orange dress fluttering like a flag, was Zoie. She spotted him mid-slide, let out a delighted shriek, and launched herself off the end straight into his arms. He caught her without thinking, swinging her up and around until she squealed. "Mr. Alexis. You came." "I wouldn't miss it," he said, setting her down but keeping hold of her hand. "This whole day is because of you, remember?" Ava stood a few paces away, relaxed in a sundress, hair loose for the first time Alexis had ever seen. She looked 10 years younger. Zoie tugged him toward a picnic table in the shade. "Sit." Mama packed sandwiches. They sat. Ava unpacked a feast, turkey and avocado, peanut butter and jelly cut into star shapes, lemonade in mason jars. Simple food that somehow tasted better than any 5-star restaurant he had ever expensed. Ava smiled, almost shy. "I still wake up sometimes thinking it was all a dream." It's real, Alexis said. And it should have happened years ago. I'm only sorry it took so long. Zoe, mouth full of sandwich, studied him with those clear, unflinching eyes. You look different now, she announced. I feel different. Less empty? He laughed, surprised at the lump in his throat. Much less empty. Good, she said, satisfied, and returned to her lemonade. Ava's eyes glistened. She talks about you all the time. Calls you her champion. Alexis shook his head. She's the champion. She saved us all. Zoe looked up again, serious now. Mama says you were lonely before. But you're not lonely anymore, right? The question hung soft between them, gentle as dandelion seeds. No, Alexis said, and realized it was completely true. I'm not lonely anymore. You showed me what actually matters. People. Connection. Truth. All the simple things I forgot while I was chasing complicated ones. Ava reached across the table and squeezed his hand once, quick and grateful. Thank you for seeing her. For seeing us. Not everyone would have. I almost didn't, he admitted, the old ache surfacing for a moment. I almost walked right past that hallway. Some nights I still dream about what would have happened if I had. But you stopped, Ava said firmly. You listened. You believed her. That's what matters. Zoe, finished with her sandwich, suddenly scrambled down from the bench and ran back to the slide, orange dress flashing in the sun. Her laughter rang out again, bright and boundless. Alexis watched her soar, arms wide like she could embrace the whole sky. This, he understood at last, was the real view from the top. Not the cold panorama from 60 floors of glass, but this, children laughing, families together, people seen and celebrated simply because they showed up and did their best. Everything else, the patents, the valuations, the headlines, was just noise. Zoe waved from the top of the slide, fearless and shining. Alexis waved back, heart so full it felt like it might float right out of his chest. The company had not just survived. It had learned how to live. Zoe reached the top of the slide again, orange dress fluttering like a flame against the blue sky. She pushed off with both hands, hair streaming behind her, and flew down the curve in one perfect, fearless arc. She landed in the soft mulch with a triumphant giggle, arms flung wide as if she had just conquered the world. She spun toward Alexis, cheeks flushed, eyes blazing with pure, uncomplicated joy. This is the finest day ever, she shouted across the grass. Everyone is happy because I told the truth. Alexis felt laughter rise in his chest, warm and unstoppable. Yes, they are, he called back. And I'm the happiest of all because you shared it with us. Zoe sprinted to him, bare feet kicking up tiny clouds of dust. She skidded to a stop right in front of him, breathing hard, and without warning slipped her small hand into his much larger one. Her fingers were sticky with lemonade and utterly certain. They stood together at the edge of the playground while the sun began its slow descent, turning the sky into layers of rose and violet and gold. The music from the stage softened into something gentle and slow. Families swayed together on the dance lawn. Children chased fireflies that had just begun to blink in the cooling air. Zoe leaned against his leg, quiet for once, watching the colors shift across the clouds. Alexis looked down at the top of her curly head and felt the words form before he could stop them. You changed my life, Zoe, he said softly. You didn't just save the company. You saved me. She tilted her face up, eyes wide and serious. From being empty? Yes, he answered, voice rough. From being empty. Zoe considered this, then nodded once, satisfied. Good. She reached up as high as she could, wrapped her arms around his leg in the fiercest hug her small body could manage, and then bolted away again, orange dress flashing between the trees as she raced back to her friends. Alexis watched her go, the little girl who had spoken 5 words and rewritten an entire world. He would always remember her this way, daring, radiant, impossible to look away from. The truth-teller who had reminded a tower full of grown-ups how to be human again. The business headlines, when they finally broke months later, told a tidy story: Velez Innovations foils $9 billion corporate espionage plot. They spoke of swift arrests, airtight evidence, and 2 former directors now facing decades in federal prison. Derek Sloan and Nathan Cole had confessed within hours once confronted with the hallway footage and the mountain of digital breadcrumbs they had been too arrogant to hide. Their sentences were long, public, and final. No appeals. No loopholes. Justice, clean and complete. But that was only the surface. The deeper story lived in the quieter places. It lived in the way Carlos now walked with his chest out, proud to wear the company logo in daylight. In Lucia's son booking bigger venues because his mother finally had time to cheer at every show. In Javier's rooftop garden feeding half the cafeteria with tomatoes sweeter than any supplier could deliver. It lived in the anonymous notes slipped under Alexis's door, thank you letters from people who had never dared speak before, now brave enough to say their names. It lived in the 4th-floor daycare where Zoie ruled as unofficial queen, teaching even the shyest new kids how to stand tall and tell the truth. And it lived in Alexis himself. He no longer worked until midnight. He no longer measured success by the number of zeros on a contract. He measured it by laughter drifting up from the park on family Saturdays, by the way Ava's eyes no longer carried the permanent shadow of exhaustion, by the knowledge that 5,000 families slept easier because one child had refused to stay silent. As true dusk settled, the park lights flickered on, strings of warm bulbs glowing like low-hanging stars. Families began gathering blankets and coolers, calling sleepy children to head home. The music faded into soft goodnight songs. Alexis stood at the edge of the field and watched the exodus: strollers and grandparents, teenagers carrying younger siblings piggyback, couples holding hands. His people. His responsibility. His privilege. He felt the old version of himself, the one who had believed power meant never needing anyone, fade like a ghost at sunrise. In his place stood a man who finally understood that real power was the courage to stop, to listen, to believe a trembling 5-year-old voice in an empty hallway. Zoie appeared one last time, running full tilt across the grass. She crashed into his legs again, hugging tight. "See you Tuesday, Mr. Alexis," she said, breathless and certain. "See you Tuesday, detective," he answered. She let go and dashed back to Ava, who waited with open arms and a smile that no longer carried fear. Alexis lifted one hand in farewell as mother and daughter walked away beneath the strings of lights, Zoe's orange dress the brightest thing in the growing dark. He stayed until the park was nearly empty, until the last food truck rumbled out and the maintenance crews, now paid overtime they actually wanted, began folding tables. Only then did he turn toward the tower, its windows glowing soft and steady against the night. The fraud was punished. The company was stronger than ever. The changes were rooted deep, no longer experiments but the new way of being. And somewhere on the 4th floor, a little girl with a silver compass around her neck fell asleep dreaming of new adventures, certain that truth would always matter, that bravery was always worth it, and that even the biggest giants could learn to listen if someone small enough was brave enough to speak. Alexis walked back into the building that no longer felt cold. For the first time in 22 years, he was exactly where he was meant to be. And the smallest voice, 5 words whispered in a hallway, still echoed, gentle and unstoppable, through every floor, every heart, every tomorrow. Sometimes the minutest tone resounds the vastest distance. This one would ring forever.